Hi, I'm Julie. I'm a licensed mental health therapist, and I take complex psychological theories and break them down into colorful drawings so that you can understand better. And today I'm talking about how I use CBT, EMDR with attachment theory, and Gottman all together to help treat individuals and couples. There's no specific order or step 1, 2, 3. I kind of just go with what the person's goals are and why they came to therapy. If a couple comes to therapy, we'll likely start with some conflict management and trying to assess how well the couple knows each other. Sometimes if they're enmeshed with one another, they don't know themselves, in which case I would recommend individual therapy and do some CBT, self-awareness, mindfulness, assess for thinking distortions, and EMDR, depending on what their history is and what their goals are. Someone would benefit from EMDR if they have a history of trauma that may be coming up as triggers in their relationship. If a person comes in for individual therapy, I may start more CBT based, but then tie in Gottman principles as they start to share more about their life and issues they may be having in their relationships, which is pretty common if they are stuck in patterns of distorted thinking, or if they're doing a combination of these two things and they're doing a process of wound healing or trauma recovery through EMDR. As a client comes in and starts talking about their goals, I try to normalize and help them kind of conceptualize what's going on with them, so that it seems less scary or less overwhelming. And so when they come in and they've got a lot of negative thoughts or negative experiences, I might say something like, of course, that makes a lot of sense. Your past experiences have shown you that the world is not a safe place to be, and that other people aren't always kind, and that, things for you haven't always worked out. So of course you would make those kinds of assumptions, and you teach them about how the brain works and how the brain works off of past experiences to predict the future in order to know what to do. And all of this is survival based. And so these beliefs about yourself, other people, and the world, they influence your thoughts. And so two different people with two different sets of beliefs are going to react to the same situation in very different ways based on the thoughts, again, influenced by these beliefs. And so a person who thinks the world is very dangerous may have the immediate thought, I'm scared, whereas the person who thinks the world is full of opportunity may have the immediate thought, this is exciting. And so because of those thoughts or those reactions to the same situation, they're going to have different feelings and behavioral reactions. So you have two different types of reactions. Internal, that can be your emotional response or how you felt about something, or internal physiological, meaning like your heart starts racing or you experience, butterflies in your stomach or weak knees or something like that. You can also have an external response, which would be in your behavior, yelling, or again, physiological in sweating or shaking or something like that. And so in CBT, you create awareness about this. You create awareness about these conditional assumptions that people make and these deals that they make with themselves to keep themselves safe. And then you teach them that they have this pattern of overestimating risk and underestimating their resources. So you help them kind of get better at assessing risk and get better at identifying their resources. And there's a lot of different ways. Actually, in my newest journal, there's a really great way to do this, identifying your resources and your resiliency through, here we go. So here's an exercise where you write down something bad that happened, but then something good that came out of it. So that's a really good CBT exercise. Here's another one, the resilience inventory. So here's the hard thing that I did. Here's what I felt inside, what helped me through it, and what this proves about me. This becomes a resource, right? So every time you tolerate sadness and grief, but still keep your commitments. Every time you take care of your body, even when you don't feel like it. Every time you stay calm in the chaos. Every time you tolerate pain and uncertainty. that becomes another resource. So when you have a risk that comes your way, you're able to identify all these resources that you have to prepare or handle this risk. So that's kind of what CBT does. And ultimately, in that process, you learn to trust yourself. A lot of people that struggle with anxiety and depression have outsourced their trust to other people, and it makes it, kind of a chaotic experience because you're constantly reassurance seeking. So you're constantly asking other people for their advice because you don't trust yourself. So if an individual is coming in with a lot of high anxiety or depression, I may start there. Here's another really good exercise to use to increase your self-awareness about some of your habits. This is the art of mindful thinking, and in the back you'll have a poster that lists all of the thinking distortions. So you've got a list here of all the thinking distortions, and then you've also got the feel wheel. So what this does is it gets you to practice identifying your feelings. So instead of just saying, oh, I was really mad about that, you can start to explore maybe some deeper emotions that you may be experiencing. Over here, you've got the thinking distortions poster. And so I'm going to flip over here. If someone comes in for Gottman therapy, right, but they have extreme polarized thinking, they're not going to be able to do half of these exercises. So the Gottman therapy is not going to be effective, because in order for Gottman therapy to be effective, both people have to accept that multiple realities exist. Someone with extreme polarized thinking is not going to be able to do that. Therefore, all of these exercises that are meant to be exploratory are going to turn into debates where they're trying to tell their partner that they're wrong, or trying to convince them to think like them. And that's not the purpose of any of these exercises. So you may run into a roadblock when you're working with a couple if one or both of them has any of these thinking distortions, because you're not going to be able to get very far in these exercises unless you address some of the blocks through CBT, EMDR, or a different therapy. These are just the ones that I'm trained in. So if somebody's experiencing this roadblock, you can educate them about these thinking distortions, and also educate them as a couple how they're going to have different ones that may be competing or causing even more misunderstandings in between them. So with this journal, or this style of journaling, you would do it for about a month, 3 weeks or a month, or over the course of a couple of months, but you're trying to assess for a pattern to see which of the thinking distortions you use most often. And then after doing this type of exercise for a few weeks or over the course of a couple of months, you become so used to doing it that you can do it in your head. And now you're easily able to reach for resources and kind of come up with a more balanced way of thinking, as opposed to this very black and white style of thinking that a lot of times when you're stuck in a loop of anxiety, that's the type of thinking that you're going to engage in. So the EMDR has a heavy background in CBT and attachment theory. Like a lot of the exercises and things that you do in preparation for EMDR, you need to kind of understand attachment theory and a little bit about CBT as well. So I will oftentimes educate the client about these different styles and where they may fall on this spectrum. And so you've got the more anxious type, the more avoidant type, and then the fearful avoidant has traits of both. And the goal is to live somewhere in this area where you're able to name your thoughts and feelings, you can have healthy boundaries, regulate your nervous system, take care of your body, and you have a trusting relationship with yourself.